Sponsored by the Warrington Revitalization Committee.
Do what?
My colleague's going to give out some shout-outs here in a moment. So, without further adu, I'm going to hand you off to the former Warrington Revitalization Committee chair and the Greg Gutfield of Warrington, the one, the only Glenn Conrad.
Okay, I'll pay you later. Good evening. I'm glad to see you all here. On each table, just by way of introduction, we wrote out a little format for tonight's meeting. I'll go through that in a second, but before I do, let me give you just a little bit of some logistics, okay? Just in case of a fire, doors. Restrooms are right here. Please feel free, whatever, get up and move around as you need to. I want to thank Mr. Van Horn, the current vice chair, and Mr. Kaufman, the current chair of the WRC, for the food and the drink. Thank you very much. I didn't have lunch today, so it was really worth it. Yeah. Okay, so tonight's candidate forum, how do I say this? Bear with us. Okay, any mistakes tonight? You guys don't mind if I do politician jokes, do you?
As long as you don't do.
Go ahead. Okay. I don't care if you do or not. So tonight, any mistakes in the typing, the questions, the presentation of the questions, those are all mine, which I'm going to immediately slough off on Jim Kaufman, the chair, okay, like a good politician would. So tonight, our goal, after a lot of discussion within the Warrington Revitalization Committee, was to explore a little bit about how the candidates think for the District 2 County Commission. This is not a debate, okay? Not a debate, nor will we take questions from the floor in here tonight. However, on your tables, there are some index cards. If you do have a question, two options. One, write it down. We'll compile all the questions after the fact and all the questions I'm going to ask tonight, and we're going to give them to all three candidates. They can answer them or not as they see fit on their social media, on their websites, however they want to do it. Okay? That lets us manage the time more than anything else. The questions tonight, we asked the candidates to provide. Okay, so each of them provided us 3 or 4 generally questions about what they would ask each other. We also asked former commissioners, Gene Valentino being one, Bill Dixon being one, certainly Doug Underhill too, to provide some questions from the viewpoint of what would you have liked to have known before you sat down in the seat. Okay? Now, we took a little editorial authority to reword some of these questions, but each one of these gentlemen up here tonight will recognize their own. Of course, they don't know who asked the other ones. Okay, so that's kind of the format. It's a little bit more like something coming out of the blue in a county commission meeting that you have to respond to. That was the intent anyway. Let's see, where else should I go on here? So tonight we'll cycle through these list of questions. We're going to try and get through 14. We'll give everybody 2 minutes to respond to one, and then a minute to comment on the other ones. The other 2 candidates will get to comment on their response. But this is not a debate, okay? So the ground rules fundamentally are stay on topic, no attacks or whining. We're looking for your thoughts and insights, and stay civil. And I did bring a little air horn off of the boat. I always wanted to use one of these in a county commission meeting, and this And this is as close as I'm going to get, so I'm going to take advantage of it. Okay, a little administration here. First, thanks to Redeemer Lutheran Church. This is an absolutely fantastic facility. I think this is the biggest crowd the WRC's ever had in here, but we do appreciate them allowing us to use it. The WRC, thanks to the WRC, particularly Jim Kaufman and William Van Horn, the chair and vice chair, for coordinating this. A special thanks to Ms. Shirley Green, who's sitting right here, for doing all the work to pull this together. Of course, thank you to the candidates for showing up. Thank you for coming here tonight. And thank you for running. So at one time, I actually considered running for office. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and after about 2 hours, I sobered up and came to my senses. But we do appreciate it because we appreciate the service to our communities. And to all the voters here, thanks for showing up and being interested. So I have a little spiel that I start off with, like, you get the government you deserve. If you participate, if you talk to these gentlemen, if you show up at the meetings, if you express your concerns, if you vote, you get the government you deserve. If you do none of those things, you still get the government you deserve. Okay? Last, I run out of breath pretty easily. So,
For your drink?
yeah.
Glenn, thanks to our video people.
And, oh yes, see, this is why Shirley's so good at this. And thanks to the Beach Haven Neighborhood Watch people. We got Michael Jones in here tonight running the video system. Keith Bowe helped set everything up in here, all the audiovisual stuff. And Jim Politsko was working on this as well. And we really appreciate this because what the WRC has for equipment just pales in comparison. So thank you very much, gentlemen. We really appreciate that.
It's mutual.
Okay.
Some seats up here, looks like 5 seats up.
And there are some seats up front if anybody would like them. Please feel free to grab them and take them to the back if you want. This is quite an open forum. Don't feel bad about moving around. We're not going to stand on protocol very much. So there's a few questions here. Are we ready to get started? Okay. One thing I did not mention. So we'll go through these questions, but about 6:45 or so, depending, we'll cut it off, and we'll give each one of the candidates 5 minutes to speak on whatever they want. Okay? Within the ground rules. Okay. So the questions kind of fall out into a couple of categories. And this was very interesting to me personally to look at this. So qualifications for the job, county operations, civil infrastructure, and the D2 or an economy at large for Escambia County. That's kind of where they group. And that was from your questions and the prior commissioner's questions. So number one, and I'm just going to go round robin here, and you guys can, I'll try and keep up and keep it in order. So in the context of qualifications, what life experiences, academic, volunteer, et cetera, have prepared you to plan and manage the county budget and operations of Escambia County government? And Mr. Brown, I'll go to you first.
Well, thank you, Glenn, and thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. This is a great crowd. I've spent the last 10-plus years working on Escambia County issues for the state, both in the legislature and for our former Attorney General. I've had a front row seat on how to solve problems, on how to get things done for issues in this county and in this region, and I've seen how working together helps you solve problems better when it comes to these things. So I think I've got a special set of experience to where not only do I understand the issues we're dealing with, I understand how to get things going and get things done from day one.
Okay. Mr. Kohler, would you like to?
I think the question was based on your personal qualifications and experiences. So when I think of qualifications for a county commissioner, I look at someone that's going to be running a $550 million budget, that's actually led and worked with people in mass quantities like myself. I've been the last 12 years had multiple large assignments. My first major leadership assignment was OIC of Navy Branch Health Clinic, Pensacola. We had about 83 employees, managed about $50 million, 3,500 enrollees there. After that, you don't get slated and screened for these jobs unless you continually perform at high levels. My next job after that was the Director of Healthcare Business. There were 60,000 enrollees in 5 states. We managed about 3,000 referrals a month, all the call center, all the referral managers, all the health benefits, all the case management. It was call center as well. It was everything in marketing for the hospital was a daunting job. I was requested after that to go to a job I didn't really want by the Deputy Surgeon General, Admiral Moulton. They'd had multiple years of problems at Navy Branch Health Clinic, New Orleans. They'd relieved numerous OICs and SELs. So I said I'd take it as long as I wouldn't get relieved, and I didn't. I made captain out of it. We had about 5,500 enrollees, worked for a 3-star general, a 2-star Army general, the CO of the base, massive amount of responsibility, 130 staff. And then after that, they rewarded me by letting me come over to be the XO of NMOTC. And that job was about, I had about 717 staff, and all over the globe, honestly. We managed 103 buildings. We pushed through 22,000 students a year. Annual budget close to $200 million. I signed just alone $2 million in travel a year. I am not worried about the job going down to be a county commissioner. The job you're hiring is for someone that can get along to get something done with 2 other commissioners in District 2. I believe I have the most qualifications for this job.
Mr. Kohler, thank you. Okay. Mr. Walsh?
Thank you for coming. Mine will be much shorter than that. I've spent my entire life in business. Matter of fact, the same business since I was 13 years old that I'm still in today. So, you know, operating a multi-million-dollar business is what I do and what I've done. So working with people and employing people here in District 2 is what I've done for my entire life. So.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next one. The context here is still qualifications, but and your personal interests and economics. So specifically on economics development, what skills do you have in bringing economic opportunities, i.e. jobs, et cetera, to District 2 and Escambia County? And we'll go to Mr. Kohler first.
Well, first thing I'd say, there's going to be something on the ballot called EDAT. It's called Economic Development and Tax Exemption. If you look at what happened out at Navy Federal, they hired about 5,400 people. It brought in $1.3 billion in revenue. The tax exemption was a little over $4 million. I'm going to support EDAT. But let's go to, I like that, the Jeffersons who explained that. But economic development, let me just share with this. I've been on the Health Authority for 10 years. We manage about $1.4 billion in municipal bonds for the last 25 years. I signed all the bonds for Baptist Healthcare, which was $678 million. I know how to be responsible with your money. I know how to have oversight, and I promise you, as economic development here in Warrington, we need a lot of work. The overlay that was one of the concerns I know with one of the members here is a big factor that needs to be changed. I went to that individual's house. He asked me to look at it. I did. That needs to be changed immediately for convenience stores. It shouldn't be 2,500 feet. That's ridiculous. I will try to change that immediately for economic development for Warrington.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Walsh? And ask me if you'd like me to repeat the question, please.
Go ahead, one more time, sorry.
Okay. Yes, context is qualifications and economics. So specifically on economic development, what skills do you have in bringing economic opportunities to District 2 and Escambia County?
Well, I would say that, you know, being a business owner, you know, I would say out of the difference between the two of us is I've provided jobs, thousands of jobs already for the community, specifically D2. But I would definitely, you know, I don't know. I'm sorry. I feel like I may not have an answer to that. So.
Well, that's one. That's one. That's fine. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. I would say knowing the government's role when it comes to economic development and how we can work with other entities to spur those types of things, and also being able to identify the types of jobs we want in this area. We have the opportunity right now with things like Triumph Gulf Coast to incentivize certain jobs and certain economic growth. But how do we make that work in Warrington and in District 2? You know, we could look for ways to partner with organizations that could, you know, incentivize the hiring of people who have criminal records. We could look to partner with our sheriff's office to figure out ways how we can identify folks coming out of prison who need jobs and how to get them trained for jobs. But we also need to understand that the basis of all of this is being able to set the foundation of economic development, and that's our real role as government. Being able to take care of the infrastructure, being able to take care of the flooding issues we have. The fact of the matter is we've got a corridor out here from Navy and Warrington where the commercial area is on septic tanks still. That's why we don't have any development in this area. Being able to use the funds that we have available to us to take care of these issues will let the private sector then come in and create the jobs we need here.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. The last question in the qualifications grouping here talks about your personal interest in civics priorities. So, or at least that's the way I interpreted it. So what community service and business activities have you contributed your time and efforts to in the past? And I'm assuming the author of this wanted to talk about local activities, but I would not limit it to local activities. And I think we'll start here with Mr. Walsh.
Are we looking for volunteer activities or?
Volunteer, whatever you think is your personal interest, and what have you contributed to, say, outside of employment?
Outside of employment? I coach locally for my school, children, multiple grades, multiple sports. For years until they stopped the Wounded Warrior Project there in Perdido Key, I fed 175 families every year for roughly 5 or 6 years until they stopped bringing them there to Perdido. I fed the Blue Angels, you know, that at the year-end show every year for roughly 200 people, you know, their families, and after the last event, donated to hundreds of sports teams and different things in the community through work and stuff. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown?
Well, I've been the treasurer, state committee man, and chairman of the Republican Party here in Escambia County. I was former chairman of the Escambia Young Republicans. I've also been involved as a mentor in junior achievement in local schools in this county and Santa Rosa, as well as the Pensacola and the Santa Rosa County Chambers of Commerce.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Let me pause for a second. And I've been consulted on here 2 things. Number 1, I forgot to mention, if you got a cell phone, please turn off the ringer. Okay. Number 2, to the candidates, please speak into the microphones. They're having a little bit of trouble hearing you in the back. Okay, I'm sorry then. Mr. Kohler?
Yeah, I think a key trademark of a public servant is long before they get into office, they show what they've done in their community. And I've been involved in this community for years. It started coaching Little League soccer at Roger Scott. It started putting on a health symposium for all the 3 hospitals when I was a lieutenant. I was in Sertoma, I am now. I put on the largest race for Neighboring Corps Relief Society for 6 years called Rock and Fly. I've been on the health authority that's given $1.5 million to charities that most people don't know in this county, from Gulf Coast Kids to the clinic out in Century to Pace Girls for Center. I mean, going on. Last year, just Sertoma alone gave $60,000 away. 2 of my Sertoma brothers are here. They can validate that. Navy Ball. We put on that. PRA, we help support Gulf Coast Kids Tribe with the kids that they do that downtown. My wife's way involved as well in public service, but I think it's a true indicator of what type of leader you're going to be. If you're not in the game before you become a public servant, you may not have the right trademarks for the job.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kohler. Okay, so that kind of concludes the 3 qualifications-oriented questions that we bend out. So the next general context topic is county operations. And so let's see, where are we? I think that Mr. Walsh is up first. Okay. So the first question here, did I get that wrong?
Did you get the last one
You
first?
got the last one. I think
I think
we'll go
I may
back
be
to-
You're up first. Okay, Mr.
We'll
Brown.
help you out, Glenn.
See, my goal tonight, okay, one of my goals tonight is to screw this up so badly that nobody ever asks me to do it again. Okay? So bear with me. I may get there. So county operations is the context. So if elected, how do you plan to build consensus with other commissioners to get things done in this district?
Well, I think we first off have to remember it's not just about 2 other commissioners, it's about 4 other commissioners. We need consensus. And part of that is just having the mutual respect and understanding that what's important for one commissioner's district, who had the same authority to send that commissioner to the board as District 2 does, should be important to the other commissioners as well, if we expect a mutual relationship. I can tell you Commissioner May recently had a town hall with students in his community, filled up Brownsville Community Center. I was there. I don't know how many other candidates went, but I can tell you it was a big deal. It was a big deal for him. And being able to form those types of relationships will help you down the road when you need something for District 2, and being able to understand that our districts need to be working together better because we share a lot of the same issues, frankly. So having that mutual respect and also showing mutual respect to the people. You know, we hear so much now that you know, the citizens are so disrespectful of government officials, but we don't show them, government officials don't show us any respect either. So what do they expect at that point? So I think being able to lead from the dais and showing the citizens that they have the absolute right to be there, they have the absolute right to say what's on their mind, and we need to be responding to them is a good way to start leading that effort.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Kohler?
Yeah, that's a question you have to look backwards on and see how someone will be able to look forwards on. If you've never, ever led difficult assignments before, you probably aren't going to have the skill set to go in and do that. Managing the amount of folks I did in my life, I had a lot of complicated employees. And you know what? We never left them behind. You learn how to get along with them. I've had years of experience in this, big jobs. I can tell, I have some thoughts in my mind of 2 different department heads that didn't get along, and we had to have a come to Jesus because it wasn't coming to meet the mission. The problem is that the county commissioners are in a downward spiral and don't respect each other, and it's embarrassing for everybody. We all are exhausted by it. We're sick of it. I know we are. It's exhausting. You can't be calling people from the dais idiots and expect the people to respect you. So the first thing you got to do is have a basic civic lesson if you get elected and act like a citizen should. So I will work with every county commissioner. I'll beg, plead, bargain, whatever I can to get something done for District 2. I'm not going to compromise my values or ethics. I know what type of man I am. But the bottom line is I'll do what's right to get something done in the district.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kohler. Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
you'll like me to reread it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Definitely, you know, like Mr. Brown said, lead from the dais. But, you know, like I said, I've managed people my whole life. And as Mike pointed out, if I talk to employees the way that the commissioners talk to each other, I'd have no employees. So dealing with people and being able to, you know, if you don't agree with someone doesn't mean you have to disrespect them. So, you know, just being able to work together and show respect to get things done.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. So the second question in this context of county operations is how do you think the new district boundaries will affect D2? And I think Mr. Kohler is up first.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't involved in that. From an outsider looking in, it looked very political. I'll just put it that way. I think a lot of people think that, but that's not where we're at. It's been decided, and we have to deal with the new districts, and it kind of goes back to the old days. I don't mind it, because I came here, I lived in Myrtle Grove, I lived in the barracks, I live in Warrington. When I came back from Guam, I lived in 1 South 73rd, I lived at 213 Palomar, so I know all this district, and so I can relate to these folks. But do I think it made the district way more competitive? Absolutely. District 2 is way more competitive. It has a lot of socioeconomic problems. It's a very diverse district when you look at downtown, all the way up to Gulf Beach. When you look at the folks in Mayfair and off Jackson, these are some depressed communities, even parts of Beach Haven. And so it's going to take someone that looks at the whole district, including Navy Point and where we live, Lakewood, Era Vista. But the bottom line is it's a very diverse district now, more so than some of the others. And it's going to take a leader that wants to lead everyone in the district.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Yes. I definitely felt that it was politically motivated as well. I wouldn't say I was happy with it. The line actually stops, within 1,000, or starts within like 1,000 feet of my house or so. Like I was almost removed as well. So that was, it was disappointing to have, an area that you grow up in removed. But, I think it adds diversity, and it did remove, we'll say a big problem area. The key is a huge issue out there, and I think it takes away some of the, attention from the rest of the district as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown?
Well, I think it's great for this area personally. I think Warrington, Navy Point, Beach Haven have sort of been passed over for the last few years. Things seem to always go out to the key, but they don't really stop along the way. So I think it's going to be great for this area. It's going to cause this area to be the focal point of this district now. It's going to cause the issues that this area has dealt with, like flooding, to be the issues that we're going to have to prioritize. So, however it was formed, I don't know, but I'm glad it was, because it's going to help Warrington out. I know that. I lived right around the corner as well on Fairway for years, and I get it. The crime's terrible over here. The flooding, we got to do something about it. We need more attention, and for right, wrong, or indifferent, we're going to get more attention now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this question is actually related to the prior question. We left them both in the same context of county operations. So what are your thoughts on having county commissioners elected at large as opposed to by a 5-district geographical areas? And Mr. Walsh, I think you're up first.
Okay. I think it should be an at-large. It's a countywide job, not a district-specific job. I think it would make it a little more competitive for, the commissioners that are on there now, and and better for the community. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown?
Well, I think countywide elections would be better. Obviously, we don't have a say in that because of the constitutional issue. But I do think we need a larger county perspective. I wish we were able to have a couple of at-large members that we could have on the board. But honestly, we shouldn't need it either. We should have people who are elected to go up there, who know how to serve, who know how to get things done, and understand that the betterment of this county is for us to all to be working together, not to have these myopic tribal blinders on sometimes that I only care about the things that happen in my district, and the other ones, so what?
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you. Mr. Kohler?
Yeah, Escambia County is one of only a handful of counties in the state that has districts. It's a unique concept when you look at it from the state. It would alleviate at large a lot of candidates because you have to raise a lot more money, and you would have to, but it would also help with what we got going on now. When there's a commissioner that can't, is voted out 4-1 a lot, all the other commissioners would have to rack and stack the problems throughout the county, which would be beneficial. So I think in that aspect, it would be better to have county at large, personally. I think that's going to be hard to overcome, though. I think some people really like the district process.
Mm-hmm. That's fair enough. Okay, I have to comment now. You guys have only been going 15 minutes. I'm going to have to just make up some questions before we're over with, because you're going way too fast. I mean, come on. You guys are having... But, all right, let me move on. So still within the context of county operations, if elected, now, I guess the context here I'm not entirely familiar with. Each commissioner, as I understand it, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, gets a certain amount of discretionary funds for their own use to basically spend as they see fit, generally within their district, but I don't know if that's the rule or not. But the question is, if elected, what would you prioritize your discretionary funds for? What are your thoughts on the use of discretionary funds? And Mr. Brown, I think you're up first.
Well, my initial thoughts are I'd like to question the premise of discretionary funds. I mean, at this point, we're in belt-tightening times. I'm sure everyone else has realized that. I'm not sure how many people at the county have at some point. We've got to see what our priorities are, and we've got to fund those first, which is public safety. We've got to make sure that these issues are taken care of before we deal with any other projects that may come out of discretionary or wherever else. We've got to go line by line and figure out where the waste is so we can be the most effective we can be and the most impactful we can be. And it starts at public safety. I'm glad to see Sheriff Simmons back here. Appreciate him coming tonight, but he needs all the help he can get, and we got to be a better partner for him. You know, public safety is the number one priority for me. It's why people like the firefighters have endorsed me, because they get it. They get that I have their back when it comes to public safety. It's why people like Scott Lunsford have endorsed me, because he gets that I understand how to get things done and can get things done for public safety. So.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you. Mr. Kohler?
Okay, I'm going to talk about discretionary funds, but the firefighter endorsement, that was, I'm just going to apologize, Kevin, they called me and apologized. That came from Tallahassee. It's the same endorsement Joe Biden got. I just want to share this with you. I got endorsed by the Police Benevolent Association Saturday. It's coming out this week. I appreciate the police having my back. They know who's got it. But let's talk about discretionary funds. Discretionary funds are power base for commissioners, all right? They shouldn't be there. They're disgusting. It's a way to hold power. It should go in the general fund. They're not going to go away, so I'm going to answer your question directly. What I would do, because I want discretionary funds, the first thing I would do is clean up Navy Boulevard and do the same thing they did at DeVilliers downtown. I think it's embarrassing that we take our fallen heroes down Barrancas through what now looks like a third world country in blight and bury them in Barrancas. That's wrong. It needs to change. So that would be the first thing I'd do with discretionary funds. But the thing I'd like to get rid of is discretionary funds.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kohler. Mr. Walsh?
Yes, I'm not a fan of them as well. I do believe they use them to, curry favor, to win favor in certain events and for things. So, but having to keep them and use them, I'd put them forth to, a project in, like Mike said here, in D2, whatever I found fit that would, that could use that money. So.
Okay. Yeah, the next question is also context is county operation and ordinances, and I would say some state law that we have to pay attention to as well. So how can you as a county commissioner, your main job is quasi-legislative, you do budgets, you do planning, you do project planning, you prioritize projects and budgets. So how can you review and improve code enforcement, particularly in D2? And I think, Mr. Kohler, you're up next.
Well, I've been dealing with code enforcement a lot lately with signs, and officer was at my house yesterday, and I was in compliance. But the first thing we do is not have wasteful calls, okay? The second thing we can do, and this is a real situation. I've talked to some people. They don't want to call into code because they feel they're going to be threatened. So the first thing I do for people, if they call in and there's a legitimate violation, I don't think they should have to be exposed, because a lot of people won't call in because they're worried whatever it is going to be threatened. Now, if it's a bogus call, they should have to be exposed. They should not be able to call on a neighbor and make a false claim. So that's the first thing I think that would be an easy change. I went with the neighbors down in Lakewood, just like I know there's some people in here from Davenport. There's some good news on the house in First Street. We're working hard. They're going to take it down. I know. We're all excited about that. But we have that same problem in other areas of the county. They have a house over in Lakewood that I went down. And the problem is the code officers are doing their job. But then it gets hauled up in magistry. And sometimes the fines are pretty extensive. But if someone lives in there, here's it in a nutshell. The ordinance needs to be reviewed, looked at, worked with the police force to get it right so that we can get the citizens that are paying the taxes and live in neighborhoods, they don't have to live next to blight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kohler? So, Mr. Walsh, let me repeat the question again. How can you review and improve code enforcement in D2?
Well, I think that maybe work with expanding their training and possibly the pay for those county employees. Mm-hmm. And or removing that, and which the sheriff may not like, but putting it back to an officer-based type. I think that people would have a little more, I wouldn't say respect, but I mean, it would be different if someone showed up to your house and you have a house in Blight and it's an officer, like an armed, trained officer. I think it would, carry a little more weight than maybe, somebody that comes and leaves a note on your door and leaves. So.
Okay, so let me follow up on that just a little bit. So would you promote then the existing code enforcement officers coming underneath the sheriff's department?
Well, I think that would fall in,
Or that's-
how to, how the training would go or what we can do. I know the city's more of an officer base, a little bit slightly different, and it seems to work well in the city, so.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Well, I'd see what they needed first. I think right now we've got about 10 or 11 code enforcement staffers. I think we still need about another 4 or 5 when it comes to that office, but let's see exactly what the needs are. Let's work with our community leaders and see where we need to be more effective, and let's try to get those things done. But let's try to solve these problems and not create them. I was talking to a gentleman earlier tonight, and first thing he said to me was, hey, I think you got one of your signs in the right-of-way. You need to come look at it. I said, all right, give me a call. Let's go fix it. I think that's where we need to be. These politicians are some of the worst violators of code enforcement out there, and we talk about this all the time. So anybody, I just tell you right now, anybody that sees one of my yard signs or something out in the right-of-way, call me, 850-346-5009. I'll come pick it up. I don't want a county employee out there, or actually, I can't speak for my friends here, but just pick it up yourself. I'm not going to mind. I'd rather y'all do that than have somebody on the taxpayer dime picking up after us like we're children. So being able to take a little pressure off of them would probably help too right now.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, the last question in the context of county operations, at least now. So if elected, what would you propose or change regarding county preparedness and recovery from potential disasters, similar to, and I mean major disasters was the context of this question, major disasters like Hurricane Ivan? And I know that that's in general not a fair question to ask you to answer in 2 minutes because there's a lot to this, but we'll give you a couple minutes of a shot here, and maybe if we have time later on, we'll come back and revisit this one. Mr. Brown, or I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh.
Well, unfortunately, that would be something that maybe I don't have an answer for. I've never been in that position to, to what their policies are, or how they handle those situations now. Mm-hmm. So, that's a hard question for me to answer.
I understand, and this was an interesting question to me, certainly pertinent. I sat through Hurricane Ivan here in Warrington, and a month of the aftermath. But there was no other context given with this question, so it is what it is here. And the current, I know things have certainly improved within the county with the command centers and the communications, and I know we've had problems in the past with communications between radios and different agencies, and communications in general, different agencies working together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are pretty well documented, but I apologize that I don't have more context to give you guys for this. But Mr. Brown, you want to take a shot?
Well, let me try the best I can with it. We didn't have Ivan or Sally hit us again, but over the last 2 weeks, anybody here had their house flooded just from the rains we've had recently? I mean, we've got a lot more problems than we need to deal with before we have another hurricane. It's just going to exacerbate it even more. That's why I think we've got to make these infrastructure issues a priority regionally. We've got to use a larger approach to get these things done. We can't just nickel and dime every neighborhood and take 20 years to do it. If so, we're always going to have these problems, whether it be a couple of bad weeks of rain or whether it be another Hurricane Ivan. So if we make the proper investments in the infrastructure we need, we won't have as many of these problems down the road either.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kohler?
This wasn't my question, but I know a lot about this. You're talking about emergency operations centers. And half the battle before an event happens is the preparation. You probably see the sign, the first 72 is on you. That's right. The first 72 is on you, but the battle plan has to be there for any event. And I've been part of those battle plans in the county for years on the healthcare side. When I was at Whiting, we did, well, I don't know, you probably all remember when we had the anthrax scares at the hospital. We dealt with anthrax scares, chemical biological scares, airplane crashes, terrorist attacks. Every year, the hospitals work with the county and the sheriff's department on EOC operations and how to deal with this. Not just hurricanes, because we could have any, like a terrorist attack we had on the base. All of these things have to be planned out. So it's not what we do as it happens. It's what we are prepared to do in advance, and that takes tactical operations and someone that's done it. I know, hands down, I'm the only guy in here that's done that for over a decade. And it's a very vital job, because when you don't have the right leadership, when something goes south, you don't get the FEMA money right away. You don't get the electrical trucks in right away. People don't get bottled water in a timely manner. All the things that start to create chaos, and then the next thing you got looting and people stressed and the hospitals are overrun. It's very vital you elect someone that understands emergency operations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kohler. So let's move on to infrastructure and social services. At least that was the way I interpreted this next batch of questions. Mr. Brown, this is going towards you, I think, first. So what's your plan? You kind of alluded to this a minute ago. What's your plan to reduce flooding in District 2?
Well, I appreciate Ms. Benson being here, sitting in the front row, working with people like Lois Benson and our partners at ECUA, but again, working on a larger watershed approach to these issues. We can't keep looking at a neighborhood by neighborhood approach. We've got so much opportunity out there with funds available through infrastructure dollars, through oil spill dollars, that we can partner with other entities. We can partner with other states. I've talked to folks in Baldwin and Mobile County about how we work together with them to develop a larger plan where we can use these funds in a watershed approach. Now, you're able to leverage more dollars. I see my friend Chris Kerb over here with Flood Defenders nod his head. You're able to use these dollars to make a larger impact instead of just going neighborhood by neighborhood, having to squabble over a couple $1 million in the county budget every year over which neighborhood and what district's going to get attention.
Okay. Fair enough. Mr. Kohler?
Yeah, the gravity of stormwater drainage goes back to poor planning, and now we're in a crisis situation. So it's not anything that anyone up here can promise you that's going to be resolved overnight. It's something that's going to have to start eating one project at a time to take care of it. Chris gave me his plan. It was $461 million. There's no way the county's going to fund $461 million. I'm just going to be honest with you. We don't have the money on a $550 million budget. That doesn't mean we can't start tackling the problem, right? And we should get the restore dollars, what Kevin mentioned and stuff, to start dealing with that. I know you guys want to do restore the millage tax to where it is. I'm going to stay away from that. That's not a winning thing, Chris, but and he wants that for stormwater drainage. But the bottom line is, it's a serious problem throughout the county. If you go to Perdido Estates, those poor people have been dealing with that for 18 years. It's unbelievable. I know you've been dealing with it. You walked me in your house, you've been dealing with it for every time it floods. It's really sad when you go into someone's house that they wanted to have their home, and they thought they could be there, and they say every time it rains, they have 2-3 inches of water going in their carpet or their tile, and now they just want to get out of there. When I walked Old Hickory, one of the ladies moved out of there because she told me she flooded 3 times and she just couldn't take it any longer. So it's a real problem. It's not an easy solution. Anyone that says it is not telling you the truth. It's a difficult solution. It's going to take someone that understands the breadth of the problem. Flood Defenders, you're doing a good job, though. You're bringing it up. You're getting people the visibility of it, and I think you're going to get some budgeting. And hopefully, if I'm in a county commission seat, I will entertain what we can to get some floodwater, stormwater drainage plans.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kohler. Mr. Walsh?
Hey, it's definitely, like Mike mentioned, there's no money in the county budget for things like that. And as he mentioned, Perdido Estates, I'm actually, like many people in here, I'm surrounded by flooding. My property floods. I have Perdido Estates behind me and Shandell in front of me. So I deal with the situation all the time. My house almost flooded in Sally. But I get the county itself in the storm of 2014, the stormwater analysis team, they did a study and came up with a plan to implement. And from what I was understanding, the county has done nothing to follow through with that plan. So, well, Chris says a little bit. So,
thank you, Mr. Walsh. The next question, again, context is infrastructure and social services. What are your thoughts on county support for low-income housing development for the homeless? And there's an example that was given, a reuse of a community center in Myrtle Grove, or one example, but there's other options around the county. And Mr. Kohler, you're up first.
Okay, so I mentioned I was on the health authority for the last 10 years. So we get people that come in and ask for money for this. Okay, it's the REAP people and Pathways to Change. So I went to all the sites where we currently have homeless after the debacle that happened under 110 that should have never happened. Chip, I'm not blaming you, but I thought we should have kicked those people out from under the bridge. It was a shame what happened down there. I think everyone was just completely couldn't believe that was going on in our city. We won't have a city if we don't get this homeless control under control. Seriously, we have 1,200 homeless people. They're living on corners. We have got to start creating some real policy, and I'm not going to tell you today I have all the answers, but I will tell you I have a few. Right now, they're using a lot of the money from the care funds to help with the social programs for the homeless. There's a problem from the state issue. There's only 2 counties, Escambia and Leon County, that have a reentry program. You know why you have more homeless than they do in Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, and all the rest of the counties between here and Leon? They don't have a reentry program. So maybe you ought to get the state representatives to get a reentry program in all those counties so we don't have more of them in our county. But we're taking them on, and we're going to take more on. It's a real problem. But I'm a compassionate person. I do believe that we have to have a program. I went down and looked at Vinci Webb's program. They're trying. It's a difficult task. The curriculum I would probably modify a little bit, being a nurse and knowing what behavioral change requires. It's not up to my level of what I would expect in the healthcare world, but it is a start. Pathways to Change. So I could talk about this for a while, but there's 3 different buildings right now that house homelessness. One is the Salvation for Families. It's run very well. There's families there with their kids. It's almost like how I lived when I first went in the Navy, in a barracks with a room with people in bunk beds. The only thing I disagree with that shelter is they don't allow the people to do ADLs and cook. They bring food in, and I don't think that's healthy to not develop skill sets with people that hopefully are going to eventually get out in the community. The homeless shelter behind the Pathways to Change, they're living in tents. I don't want to see people live in tents. Oh, I can't keep talking, Glenn? You ask a question?
Give me a little bit more before I... Well,
anyways,
how much do you
the
like
gravity of the homeless situation is huge. It's going to take someone that's going to sit down with a lot of players, the social network, as well as other, and police force and the sheriff's department, because it's becoming... But I will tell you this. I will make some ordinances that will make homelessness, they either have to get into a program or we're going to have to change some things, because we're not going to have a city if we keep this up.
Okay, thank you. And I did let Mr. Kohler run over. Therefore, I'm going to let the other 2 gentlemen run over as well, if you choose to. We've got, it seems, we're doing well on our schedule here. And I guess I have a stickler for this time thing, so please bear with me. But Mr. Walsh, again, so what are your thoughts on county support for low-income housing development for the homeless in the county?
I agree. We definitely need, low-income housing. And I mean, it's needed everywhere, in every city, in every county. I'm not a huge fan of contributing, tax dollars to nonprofits to fund those, to help them. But I'm also not a fan of snatching, people off the street and pushing them further out of the city into the county, to hide them in the woods. I don't think that really addresses the situation. I think it kind of it grows the situation even more and puts it in different areas of the county. So I think that's it's something that would have to be addressed. And and I don't know that Mike mentioned ordinances. I don't know that and I'm not saying he's saying arrest them, but I don't know that making ordinances and pushing them to different parts of the county is a solution either. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown?
I think, working with all of our community partners to address this, we've got to look at it from all angles. Working with organizations like REAP, who I've worked with for years and got funded through the state for years, and working with other organizations like foster care to make sure kids aren't falling through the cracks when they're coming out of the system. Working with places like Veterans Court and other places that provide services for people who may have had some type of substance issues or issues in the past to get them back on their feet. But also working to try to develop more workforce housing, where you can use incentives from things like Triumph, where there's a program in Walton County where the sheriff developed a workforce housing program for people coming out of prison. Being able to use, again, these funds that we have available to us now that don't come out of your wallet, that we can use to solve these problems.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, the next question. Again, the context is infrastructure with a sideline on community parks. So a little bit more of the context here for the audience, because I've lived here a long time and I didn't know about this. But here north of Navy Boulevard, just west of W Street and between W Street and Old Quarry, is a place called Jackson Lakes. It's also been known as the Clark Sand Pit over time. It's now a fenced-in county area. It's there's some very deep lakes. Some of them are very pretty. It has been used to deposit waste in the past out of Bayou Chico, one of them anyway. One of them is actually spring-fed, and it's a pretty place. So here's the question for this in terms of social services. What are your thoughts, and do you support opening Jackson Lakes to the public? And what park amenities are possible, do you think are possible? And what priority does this rank for you? And how would you support paying for it? Now that's a pretty loaded question again, so I'll let you guys run over a couple of seconds from the last one, so you can answer this one if you want. And Mr. Walsh, you're up first.
I do, I believe it's an asset there. If anyone's seen it, it's a beautiful area. I do think it should be open, but I do believe that that opening should obviously follow behind infrastructure and public safety and stormwater. But
Okay.
We have a lot of park land here in Escambia County that's either vacant, not taken care of, or not being used. The county shouldn't be in a owning land business. It would be nice to see them sell a lot of that land and put it into certain areas like Jackson Lakes. I believe Marty, I thought I saw him in here. They're using one of the lakes, hitting golf balls, into it and retrieving them. So, one of them's being used, I thought. So it's, I think it's a beautiful area, and if people could see it, they'd want it open. So.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for specifically mentioning the prioritization too,
Yeah, I did
with the
want
other
to.
projects. Mr. Brown?
I'm sure it's a beautiful area, and I'd love to work with some corporate or private sponsors to try to get it opened up and looking good. But as far as county funds go, until we get, flooding taken care of, until we get public safety taken care of, until we get roads taken care of, that's not going to be a priority I'm going to want to say public funds need to go to.
Okay, thank you. That's fair enough. Mr. Kohler?
Okay, so the county manages about 100 parks now. And parks are a great thing. I love green space, but parks turn into blight when you don't take care of them. So if you go over to Lexington Terrace, the dog people asked me to come out and look at the dog park. Has anyone seen the dog park at Lexington Terrace? Is it a dog park or a sand pit? It's a sand pit. They want that revitalized. The people in Lakewood and Edgewater, they want their parks. They can't even get the trash picked up. So they want the trash picked. Sorry, Lois. They want the trash picked, but that's not just Public Works. But the bottom line, the people that live in the current parks in their neighborhood want the parks maintained. So there's no way, sorry, that I could support this unless there was additional funding. Also, on the backside of this park, if you've walked it, it's a large homeless area. Not off Navy, but off Jackson. There's a large homeless on that area. I know Marty is getting a good bit of business for the hitting the golf balls there, and I think that's great for his business. But I'm not in favor of opening up that area without the funds, no way at all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kohler. Okay, the next question, again, about parks and the greenway areas. What would you do to improve, clean up, and help residents better utilize parks and greenways, and for example, the Jones Creek area, which has a long boardwalk down this, what once was a very pristine wetland. So again, I'm sorry, what would you do to improve, clean up, and help residents better utilize the parks and greenways? And Jones Creek would be one example. And Mr. Brown, you're up.
Well, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I would want to partner with folks in the community. I'd want to find some private or corporate sponsorships to try to find ways we can spend money to make these places nicer. I do think they're great places, and they're places that a lot of people enjoy. But again, I'm more worried about our roads. I'm more worried about flooding being the priority before we spend money on things like nature trails, as valid as they are.
Okay, understand, that's fair enough. That's what we're asking. We want to know how you guys think about these things. Mr. Kohler?
Yeah, obviously, infrastructure, the budget for the county is based on funding the police, the EMS, the firefighters, the roads, things like that. But the question was on Jones Creek. And if you've been down there, it's just not maintained. I go back to what I said just a few seconds ago. Everyone wants green space. It adds to mental health. It's healthy for people to get out and walk. It's good for us to be in these places if they're maintained. If they're not maintained, then they don't add to the neighborhood or the community. So the biggest thing, the root cause of where we're at right now is we don't have the staff at Public Works to maintain the parks. That's where we go back to. We don't have people that can maintain the parks. So if we go back to that, that's where you need to start and see how do we get people hired to maintain these jobs, because that's what's lacking. And then we can go and see where we can maintain or grow the parks. But I don't think we need to grow parks at all right now. I think we need to maintain and clean up the parks we have.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Back to the point I made earlier with the 100 or so parklands. I mean, there's so many that are not used that are labeled parks that are used for absolutely nothing. And I just think that if we were able to sell some of those off and, you know, put that money into ones that people do want to use. And also, if we remember that as Mike said, the county has 463 vacancies. So obviously they are missing employees like a lot of businesses in the county. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Let's see. And then the last question in the context of infrastructure and social services. On a specific park here in D2, how would you proceed in reopening the Lexington Terrace Community Center? If you're not familiar with that, I'll give you a little context. Just up Old Quarry Road here, there's a park called Lexington Terrace. There's a very nice county-built, paid-for community center there that was last year early closed because of some termite damage, and it's been quite a while to get the county to take some action on this in this area to do an engineering assessment. They did find money to do an engineering assessment, et cetera, et cetera. We're now looking, I think, at the statuses of the particular cost of it and doing the contracting. But the timing here, I think, was the context of this question that was asked. So how would you proceed in reopening and perhaps streamlining the timelines to do some of these maintenance and repairs on these community parks and their facilities? And I think, Mr. Kohler, you're up first on this one.
Yeah, I didn't realize the extent of this till I was looking at where precincts were going to vote, and they're moving. That used to be a precinct for the folks to vote in over there, and they're moving it over to PSC because of this termite damage in the roof. And I don't want to get quoted on the feasibility study, engineering study, but I think it's $40,000 is what they're going to pay for the study. The roof itself probably isn't. I mean, they're paying more for the study than they could probably just pay for the roof when it gets done. But the bottom line, this is how government works. Anyone that's worked in government knows that you have to go through these layers and layers of stuff that don't make sense a lot. So to answer your question in short, from my understanding, it's termite damage. They didn't need a feasibility study. They just needed someone to go in and contract and fix it. We wasted a lot of money on that, but I'm sure they had to do it because of government regulation. I think it should be opened as soon as possible, and I think they have the funding for it now, Glenn. I'm pretty sure they do.
I don't know. I
think they do, but I could be wrong on that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, Mike touched on the subject there. I didn't know the exact amount, but I know that they spent, you know, or they're going to spend money on the study, and it was probably enough to cover the roof of the building to get it open. You know, and it was a polling area, and it should be open. Obviously, common sense would tell you just to, you know, find a contractor and get it bid out and get it repaired. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Well, you know, I think it kind of goes back to a question we had earlier, and the fact that this should have been done a long time ago, but you need an advocate who is able to work with people. You need an advocate who understands how to deal with the other commissioners and the department people, and somebody that you know when you call and have an issue, it's not going to take this long just to get a roof fixed on a community center.
Well said. Thank you. Okay, the next topic, 3 questions on economics. Economics in the area here, that is the context. So what would you do to streamline economic development in the county in terms of regulations and permitting? And that's all that they asked. That's all they said. So I don't have any other context to give you. And Mr. Walsh, you're up first. Again, what would you do to streamline economic development in the county in terms of regulations and permitting?
Well, I think that, to speed the process up, I'm assuming you're asking, or they're asking the process dealing with the county, I would imagine?
I've only got what they sent me.
Okay. Well, maybe who asked the question? They could ask that.
I won't tell you.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe they could elaborate on what they're asking is what I'm, it's
I
really
understand.
broad,
Yeah.
to say that, but I mean, if you've ever pulled a permit at the county, it is an ordinary deal. But that may go back to, there's 463 jobs open at the county. Maybe they don't have enough people to get it done. I don't know.
Okay. That's fair enough. Mr. Brown?
Well, first, I want to make sure that the codes and the ordinances that we have in place are being equally and fairly ruled on. We don't need people getting exemptions for things and people being able to have loopholes to get around these ordinances. And then I'd work with our business partners. I'd work with folks in the chamber, and I'd try to understand exactly where we could do better when it comes to regulations. I try to get all the departments in the same room when it comes to this, and so we don't have all this finger pointing back and forth of, well, it's permitting or it's whatever. Then we can finally get something done and get some answers and understand what exactly is onerous and what we need to change.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective. Mr. Kohler?
Yeah, sure. So I sat down with some developers. Two of my neighbors are developers, and they do complain about the permitting process. One of the guys, Neil Nash, the developer downtown, he said there's only one person that can do permitting. She's highly qualified, but there's just too much work coming in for her to handle it. Now let me tell you a story that's kind of sad. Some of you may know the Browns. They own Brown Helicopter. I've been friends with them for years. And the Browns decided they have Ferguson Field and they have a aviation depot that they have out there off 98. They actually moved out of Pensacola into Lillian because it was so complicated to get permits. And now they have 8 to 10 hangars over in Lillian, Alabama. Now that's a lot of jobs and taxes we lost just because someone couldn't figure out and help these people to get it done. And I know they're honest people, and I think it's sad. So we need to get more people that can do permitting, but we also need to get move things along in a fashion. My neighbor, Zach Swigert, many of you know him, he's a developer. He said the same thing that you said tonight. It takes too long to get permits. So the process needs to be looked at and improved. I'm not saying anyone's wrong. I just think it's like anything. You have to have a process improvement project for it. Make it better.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is kind of long. It's very pertinent to D2, and the context is economics and, to a degree, the area's heritage. So bear with me here. I'll probably misread this. What is your position on the NAS, Corey, and military missions here, and what can you do to eliminate potential threats, base security, encroachment, et cetera, to relocating the military activities? And, if elected, what policies and activities would you propose to ensure a continued military presence? And Mr. Brown, you're up first.
Well, the mission of the base has to be paramount, and we have to do whatever we can do to support the CO and the mission out there. We can't afford to lose any missions when it comes to NAS or anywhere else around here. Now, what can we do? We need to start working on how to make this area outside of the base better. We need to talk about the septic tanks that are up and down Navy Boulevard. We need to talk about the school system. I understand that there's not a lot the county can do about the school system, but at the same time, we need to be talking to the folks on the school board to understand what their priorities are and what their issues are so we can help them advocate to the state. We've got to be able to look at the economic issues, the code enforcement issues, and the blight issues around this area if we want to continue to be attractive to the military mission here. We've got to partner with organizations that will help promote the type of educational needs we have around here. I went to the Chappie James Flight Academy recently and was able to tour and see what they do for actual students in this area that are from areas of disproportionate poverty, that they're able to help learn STEM and be able to transform their lives. Those are the types of organizations we need to be partnering with and supporting so we can make the area outside the base better, so we can make the area more attractive for more missions to come in as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kohler?
This wasn't my question, but I love this question. So the mission of the base is to train, equip, or support the warfighter. That's the mission of the base. We can convolute that however we want to, but that's why we've had training here for years. So the real question is how we're going to preserve training, and I'm going to talk about that. So the first thing you do, you have to have a force protection plan. Anyone that's been on that base, you have to have a force protection plan that happens every year, all the time. Let me tell you what the historical reason why we're where we're at. When I joined the Navy, we had 2.3 million active duty throughout the country. Today, we have 1.3 million people on active duty. There's 1 million less people going through training and serving their country now. That affects us here. This school used to have a lot more people in it because we had a lot more families in this area. So we lost a lot of people, a lot of areas across the country that are military lost them. So let's talk about preservation. Are we preserving what we have? The base brings in $1.3 billion a year to the economy. If we were to lose that, any of those resources, it'd be a huge impact. Well, let's do a history lesson. Have we lost any of those? Yes. We've lost AOCS. We lost the Lexington. We lost NDEPS. Let's go to the CONUS study of 2016 that was the Navy hospital that most people don't realize. We lost the inpatient. We lost the ER. We lost the ICU. We lost the family medicine program. There's going to be about 800 jobs. So you need to have someone that really understands government inside and out before they come up with these bright ideas of doing things. And I'll tell you this. In 1993, I was a warrant officer in Oakland Naval Hospital. Guy that lost both his limbs said, will you wheel me down to the auditorium? There was a guy named Ron Dellums. Anyone here know who Ron Dellums is? Yeah, he was an African-American chairman of the Armed Services Committee. It was before the BRAC. I didn't go to lunch because I kind of got interested in the story. So the guy says, we're not closing Oak Knoll, we're not closing Presidio, we're not closing Treasure Island, we're not closing Alameda, because I'm the chairman of the Armed Services Committee and Bill Clinton's the president. Guess what happened? They all closed. All of them. So when a politician tells you what they're going to do, get ready. When you have a Democratic president and a Secretary of Defense, they can do service line cuts in a heartbeat, and all of them will just say, pretty please stop, because that's when it happened. We have historical precedents. Please, this is the most important thing for Warrington I can put out there. I can't express how important it is. Corpus Christi would love to take training. If you know anyone that works on the base out there, we don't have enough flight space with Eglin and Herbert and commercial traffic. You need to have the right people talking the right issues on this, and I can tell you, I think I'm the only one that has that experience.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler. Mr. Walsh?
Definitely protecting the mission of the base, and it's the largest economic impact here in Pensacola, which would lead us to, maybe speaking about the road that they want to, get the museum back open and the road passing through the base. I think those are a bad idea. I think, messing with anything that would affect the impact that the base and the jobs and the money that it brings in is just is not a good idea. And real quick on that note, if the state or the money's there to put a road through the base, then maybe we should direct it towards Sorrento. So,
Amen.
Okay. Fair enough. Yes. Thank you. On that topic, or related at least, the last question in this context: if elected, what priorities and activities would you propose to limit encroachment affecting NAS security missions and airspace? And Mr. Kohler, I think you're up first.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. They have already done some of that. I don't know if you know Bill Dixon Park. He's my neighbor. They named that, and that was partly because they didn't want encroachment on the base for safety reasons. The answer is you don't allow building that close to the airfield. I mean, that's the simplest answer for it. Unfortunately, people have moved all along there because they want to be next to the water, and then some people complain about the sound and this and the other thing. There isn't much space left not to encroach. If you've been up and down there, it's already been encroached, but very little. So you just got to make policies that you don't increase it anymore.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Right around the same lines. Just don't allow the development to encroach so much on the base, and I think that was a topic with the school there in Sorrento as well. So.
Okay. And may I ask you to speak more into the mic?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Brown?
I hate to sound like I'm answering the same question twice, but I mean, the development has pretty much happened around the base already. But I think the bigger concern is, again, how do we make the area outside of the base where folks are going to live when they're stationed here, how do we make this better? How do we help the education system here?
Right.
How do we fix the road here? How do we work with other people to get these areas more attractive so that we don't have to worry about losing missions? I was able to work with the Florida Defense Support Task Force for a few years and able to go around and see how other communities help their bases be more attractive and help their bases, put up, fortification so they don't have missions being removed. And it all starts at the community level. So we've got to do a better job engaging the community around here, talking to the people of Warrington, and being able to fix these issues before they start affecting our missions.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, so that was the 14 questions that I had started off with. I've got a couple of spares here. Some of them I just can't ask. It's interesting. But let me address a little different topic for a second. I got a note from one of the audience that's requesting me, and Mr. Kohler, I'm going to address you on this directly. We've spoken several times before, that requests that I address you as Captain Kohler.
Not necessary.
I'm not going to do that tonight because, and here's why, this is a civilian position that these gentlemen are applying for. Mr. Kohler, we respect your service. Thank you very much. I worked around the military my whole career, but
I didn't ask for that. So whoever did that,
I know.
But I want to make sure that's out there.
I just want to explain
this.
this context now for the individual that did it. So, and it's okay. I got in trouble once for calling a retired two-star general Mr. So we'll let it go at that. But yeah, this is a civilian position. I've got to be equitable to everybody, all three of you here tonight, and I intend to do that. Okay, so now some of the spares, without the more salacious questions. I don't have context for this, okay, because this was just given to me as one of the submitted questions. So I can't tell you, but the question is, how would you go about consolidating redundancies in the local government? And they gave me no context for what redundancies those were. So I'm going to throw that out as if I'm one of your constituents coming up to the BOCC meeting, and that was my complaint. So now you're on the BOCC meeting, you're sitting there with your peers, and somebody gives you a moderately ill-posed topic to address. And I'm going to let you give you a couple of minutes each to think about and respond to this. How would you go about consolidating redundancies in the local government? And let's see, I think Mr. Walsh, you're up first.
That is a tough question.
And this is hard. This is a hard one.
It is a hard question, and I think if I was in a meeting and that was asked to me right now, I'd have to tell them that I would get back to them. Because
okay,
I don't have your answer, and I'll figure it out.
I don't know what I would do in that context either. Okay, Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
Well, off the top of my head, I would go back to our budget process and say, what are our priorities? Let's get them funded, and let's go through line by line and see what these other issues are. Let's see where the waste is. Let's see where we can trim. That'll remove some right there. But again, let's start with the priorities, and then let's go from there.
Okay, Mr. Kohler.
So years ago in Pensacola, there was a group that tried to do consolidated government, similar to what happened in Duval County. And it's actually would be very visionary for our community. If you look at the imprint of the city, it's about 54,000 people, when the county has about 321,000. You look at just the political infrastructure that is overlapping from services. It actually hurts us for economic development. When you look at the size of the city, people don't really respect the size of the county because it looks like a very small place from anyone wanting to do business in this area. So if I was gonna, this is a tough question because technically no one wants to, a lot of people want to be part of the city, but the city probably should annex more areas outside of the, in the county, but no one wants that because they don't want the taxes. So I think a regional consolidated government would be nice if it was a city and the county were combined, but I wouldn't hold my breath. They failed the last time they did that, or tried.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting viewpoint too. I find it interesting, none of the three of you came back to the constituent and said, what redundancies are you talking about?
There you go.
Oh, Glenn, you want to share those with us?
I don't know what they are. So I'm just a mouthpiece here, that's it. Okay, one more question, and then after this, it's approaching 6:45. We'll take a little pause. We'll give you each 5 minutes or so, however much you want to take, to just talk about your own perspectives on running, whatever you want to say here tonight to the group. Again, the ground rules will be, no sniping, no, be civil. And then we'll open up, that'll be the end of this formatted questions period. We'll stay around here tonight. If you want to come up and meet people one-on-one, have personal dialogues. I can't tell you how long we'll stay, because these gentlemen have lives and wives too, so we want to be considerate. But we'll hang around for a bit if you want to have one-on-one dialogue. And I would also ask you now, if you've generated any questions during this dialogue, to please write some down. We'll gather them up. We'll make a big list of them. We'll give them to all of the candidates. They can respond to them or not as they see fit on their websites or social media. And we'll go with that approach to a bunch of individual questions. So, okay, here's the last one. Context is infrastructure and economics. What are appropriate projects for funding from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill monies, such as Restore, et cetera, those kinds of things? And Mr. Brown, you're up first.
Okay. Well, believe it or not, I did not submit that question. Well, you've got to be able to understand the differences between those dollars. You have some dollars that come directly to the county. They call that Restore Pot 1. The county is going to receive about $70 million out of that, and they do a pretty good job at picking projects and using the Restore Council to get those things funded. You've got another large pot of money out there that the county should be going after, in my mind. It's things that we've talked about with the flood defenders to deal with infrastructure issues, to help this whole watershed, if we look at a larger approach, to deal with these problems we're talking about that are foundational. And those are the funds that you should use to deal with what the county should do with economic development. After that, we should be helping our private sector partners. We should be helping our education partners to develop plans for Triumph, where we can use these economic dollars that have been set forth by the BP spill that can then come in and we can create jobs in this area. But again, we're not going to get jobs in this area along this corridor until we get off the septic tanks. I'm just going to tell you. So we've got to be able to understand how to use these dollars hand in hand, what they're best for, and how we can have them work together. And oh, by the way, the more you do this, the more you can leverage from other dollars, like the federal infrastructure dollars and other grants out there. So being able to understand how all these things work, being able to understand how to work together and develop these large plans where you can deal with these issues instead of nickel and diming every single neighborhood, and 20 years later we're still dealing with the same problem. That's how I think we should get this done. That's how I think you should use these monies in order to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Kohler?
Okay, so this is a two-part question. So first, the Triumph Gulf Coast has a board that makes recommendations about 70% of the funds that go back into 8 different counties, right? And then there's the Restore funds that are unique to Escambia County. There's 47 different projects currently going on in Escambia County. They're broken down into 3. They're broken down to environmental, infrastructure, and economic. So a couple that are going on right now is BioChico. Obviously, the septic to sewer is going on phase 1 and phase 2. The Perdido Shorelines 1, and that's over at White Sands Beach, that's on there. All the boat docks, there's 4 different, 2 were in District 2, that was under infrastructure restore dollars. But you can look at that. There's 47 different restore dollars that came out of the Deepwater Horizon, 1.5 billion. Those recommendations, none of us will be on the Board of County Commissioners, and we'll have to work with each other on which one of those projects will be funded. What I find amazing is there's not one economic dollar spent in Warrington out of that money.
Fair
Maybe
enough.
we should bring that up and try to get some economic dollars out of that. That's what I'd try to do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, the Restore funds obviously allocated for county projects, and I believe those, he mentioned some of the projects obviously need to be, addressed and pushed to the front. But as far as the Triumph funds, I don't know that, government is who I want trying to create economic development or jobs in a community. I think it belongs in the private sector. I don't know that, in 30 years, we just touched on it in a way, what has happened in Warrington, Where is the money going that comes out of trial? So.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that concludes all the questions that I wanted to ask. 5 minutes each puts us at 7:05, ending. We'll go down the list and let you guys have 5 minutes each to address whatever topic you want within the guidelines. Mr. Brown?
Okay. Well, thank you for being here and sitting through all this tonight. As you know, I've had the opportunity to work on Escambia County issues for the last decade. From things like streetlights in Cervantes and Brownsville to things like the Blue Angel license plate, but specifically on things like the oil spill and on helping people when it comes to dealing with their government. I truly believe we have a once in a generational opportunity to deal with the issues that have been plaguing District 2 for the last 10 years. I can remember that for every year the last 10 years, we've had these issues. Come to Tallahassee, ask for water project money. You're not going to get it because there's no skin in the game back here. People don't know how to work together. People don't know how to work with the state. We've got an issue on Sorrento Road that we've known about for years and still can't do anything with because DOT will tell you right now the county doesn't know how to get on the same page and prioritize it. Thank God we got people like Representative Andrade back here that's fighting to get our shoulders widened out there sooner than later on Sorrento to make it a little bit safer. But you've got to understand how to work with people, and you've got to understand how to deal with large issues and the scale that they're in. You've got to be out there talking to people. You can't just sit back in your office and wait on the problems to come to you, because if they ever do, they're going to be too big to deal with anyway. You've got to be out talking to people. I believe that this role is an advocate that needs to be meeting with different neighborhood associations, neighborhood watches, meeting with the sheriff's office, meeting with the schools to understand how we can be a better advocate for our people here. I think that's what it's about. Being able to work with people like Vicki Campbell, who I'm proud to say has endorsed me, and people in our legislative delegation to understand how we can be the most effective and most impactful for District 2. Because look, we've got a lot of catch up to do here. We've been passed over for the last few years. We have got to be able to get back on our feet, and we have the opportunity from what it looks like District 2 being the next in line to be chairman of the board as well, to be as impactful as we can be. And we need somebody who understands how to get things done on day one to make those things happen for us.
Okay, thank you much. Mr. Kohler?
Glenn, 5 minutes is a long time, so I'll start out with a joke. How come the pony didn't talk?
You don't have to use it all.
I'll try. How come the pony didn't talk? He's a little hoarse. That's why I'm going to be after 5 minutes. All right, so first I'd like to share something with you. I'll tell you a little bit why I got in the race, why I'm here, why Pensacola matters. I showed up here in 1988 on an airplane, never flown on an airplane until I joined the Navy at 17 years old. My first job was at Navy Hospital, Pensacola. I was the lowest ranking guy in the lab, so you get the crappy hours. You get to work weekends and nights, and that's what I did. But I was able to walk down to Pensacola Junior College, people just chilling, and I got my 2-year degree as a nurse. The most trusted profession. I tell that to everyone all the time. Huge by any other profession out there for 20 years in a row. And there's a reason for that. We'll follow up on that in a little bit. But I was fortunate. I didn't have a weekend off for 3 years, and that's not a joke. And I literally did walk down, and they still don't have anything. The roads expand a little bit, but there's no sidewalks, so you walk through the brush. It's funny, I saw the provost today, Miller, at the Rotary, and we talked about that because I came back and they asked me to give the commencement address in 1998. But my life changed here. I never thought that I was going to be a kid that never met his biological father, that could have success. And this place was a place that gave me that option, a place to start and believe in. And I kept coming back, and I kept having making an impact in the community in different ways. So I left here, and I went around the world, and I kept coming back. And every time I came back, I made sure I did one thing that impacted this area. When I came back from Guam, I put on the health symposium with all 3 of the different hospitals. They don't have it now. You know why? Because it grew so big, and the base center's still there, and we couldn't get over 400 people. So the base center needs to change. But all the executives, and when I left, it went away. I came back after, when I came back from DC, obviously I started teaching trauma nursing for all the hospitals here. The reason they're level 2 hospitals, most of you don't know this, is because Mike Kohler started TNCC in all of them. It happened. You can ask Priscilla Odom, all of the folks out there. I had a skill set that no one else had as a nurse. It's why we have level 2. It's one of the Joint Commission requirements. Then I got tasked to raise money for Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. And Judge Hoskins, as many of you know, he's a good friend of mine. He said, will you put on this race? I said, as long as you and Mo stay out of it, I will. And let me do it. And they did. We raised more money than any other fundraiser ever in the history on the base for Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, $230,000. I've given back to this community for years. My wife's given back. We care about this community. We live in this community. She teaches at Warrington Middle, which most of the people in this room know has been under fire. A lot of people that are good people went to that school, and now it's going to be a charter school. There's a lot of people that are kind of sad about that. The health authority alone has been a blessing. I volunteered for that. I can't express how much that's impacted your community. Most people don't know we're a volunteer force. We don't get one nickel from the county. All the money that's raised comes out of the bond fees that we charge for the bonds that we put out, and the small bonds and our small bank program that we give to all the different 501Cs around the county has made just an enormous impact for the community. Like I said, $1.5 million we've given away just in that. Here's what I'll tell you. I'm different than these two guys on each side of me. They're good men, but I'm clearly a different guy. I've had the jobs that you need to qualify to be the right person for this. I've done the jobs. I've continually been asked to take on bigger jobs because I've succeeded at them. If you trust me, you're going to get something you almost never get when you get a vote. You get someone qualified and someone that's provenly trusted by Gallup for 20 years in a row. That never happens. You never get that choice on a ballot. You never get a vote for someone that's in a profession that's been the most trusted profession for 20 years. I appreciate y'all being here tonight. I respectfully request your vote, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler. Mr. Walsh?
Yes. Thank you for having me tonight. I would say that, I'm obviously quite different than the two of these guys. I'm just a regular citizen, and I decided to, the issues around me with the flooding and the traffic are things that drove me to get involved. I made that decision, and it's a hard decision, especially when I've never been involved in politics or, in boards or any of these things that these guys have done. But, I had the passion to want to do it. I went and spoke at a county commissioner meeting when they were going to close the beaches, and I knew that it was going to have a direct impact in my business, that eventually I was going to have to lay off like 40 people because I just, at that time, could not continue to pay these guys and have no business. Because I knew, even though the beaches are private, just like when a hurricane's coming in, it's not near us, and they say, oh my God, the beach is empty out. I knew as soon as they said beach accesses were closed, that it was going to slow down in Perdido and have a direct impact on me. And it did. They voted to close accesses, and immediately I was doing wintertime numbers that I couldn't pay employees that have families, that have children, that live in the district. So I went down to speak, and they had limited the time to like 1 minute and 30 seconds. And I was like, I got my name out, a few things, and I was like, and I had Barry tell me to, hurry up, please, wrap it up. And I remember I called my wife and I said, I've never done anything like that in my life, but that's it for me, And, good or bad, I'll never be as smooth as Kevin or Mike, but, I'll do my best and do what I can, to represent the district and the county. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Now, from myself personally, I really appreciate you three gentlemen showing up here, putting yourselves out there, and enduring this context, and I'm sure of what's to come. So anyway, may we have a big round of applause for these candidates. Okay, that concludes this part of the session. If you want to hang around, please do for a bit. If you've got questions, please leave them on the table. You don't have to put your name on them. We'll compile them and get them to these folks. And thank you very much for coming.
Well, we want to thank you guys for coming out, doing the audio visual,
and being there and support for us. And thank you, Shirley, for getting them in here.
And for Glenn's level head and editing questions and asking them in his unique sense of humor. We appreciate all that.
Actually, I wish I could have asked some of the questions, but too racy. So, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How did the candidates do? How did the candidates do?
Actually, they did very well. They were very well, pretty organized themselves, and they stayed on topic. They were civil. This was a good group. We appreciate them coming out.
And our whole motive for this was we wanted to discover how these guys thought and could they think on their feet when they get to the county commission. And I think all three of them can think on their feet. And we had a couple of answers that were very honest and said, well, I don't know. So to me, that's a plus.
And that's refreshing.
Yes.